Good evening, and thank you for joining us on the tonight's show, The Lessons of Vietnam. My name is Bill Dixon. I'm your host, and we're going to be talking about a man tonight that was, well, let's put it this way. He would make Rambo look like a wimp. Why they hadn't made a movie about this man, I cannot understand. But let's go to the first screen where we can talk about how to get the show and so forth. There you go. Well, okay. Well, the screen before that down, if you would. There you go. This is the Lessons of Vietnam show, as you probably already know because you tuned in. We're telling the story of the Vietnam War and the men and women who served the United States military. We're trying to dispel some of the myths and half-truths. Again, I'm your host, Bill Dixon, Vietnam veteran, 67, 68. We're broadcast courtesy of Nissan Communications Worldwide Studios. If you have a comment or suggestion, or you'd like to be a guest on the show or whatever else, you can contact me, Bill Dixon, at dixonbill80@yahoo.com. Now, if you want to participate during the live show, make a comment or whatever, you can dial 919-518-9773, or even better, go on Skype and dial up to Computers 2K Voice. Give your password or whatever, and you can come on the show and ask questions or make comments or whatever. I'm not an answer and related to me. There's too many out there right now, veterans that we're losing, especially during this pandemic and so forth. If you are a veteran, you know a veteran that's having a crisis, don't wait. Pick up the phone, dial 1-800-273-8255. There's somebody there waiting to talk to you. They're out there just waiting for you. You can't do it alone. Reach out, let someone help. Don't get that stubborn, I was in the military stuff out there. Reach out. Okay? Now we're going to talk about this man. We know him as Roy. His real name was Raul. And we're going to talk about why he changed his name and so forth. There you see his picture, Master Sergeant, and the Medal of Honor that he was received. And when I give you his story here, he has two stories. You're going to believe it, but it's all true. Raul Perez Benavidez was born 5 August in 1935 in the rural Texas town of Landau in South Texas, in a farmhouse with only candles and lanterns for light and no running water. He was a child of a Mexican-American farmer, father, and a mother who was a Yaqui Native American. Now, when his mother and father got together, neither family were too happy. The Yaquis didn't want her to marry a regular person, Hispanic, and his parents didn't want him to marry a Yaqui Native, but they made it work. Tragically, though, his father died from tuberculosis when Benavidez was 3 years old. 5 years later, the same ghastly sickness struck down his mother. That's him as a young kid. At 5, he was sent to a one-room Spanish schoolhouse to learn English. He learned English and how to get in trouble. At 6, he attended a St. Mary's Catholic school where he found many ways to know the nuns. He also learned to work the streets for pennies a day and how to be a tough kid and to fight. There was a lot of prejudices in the South Texas right at that time for Hispanic and people down there. So they'd call him all different names and he'd beat them up. Raul's mother remarried a year after his father's death and her new husband, and she had a little girl together. The stepdad was not mean to Raul and his brother Rogelio, but he was indifferent to him. Didn't spend a whole lot of time with him. On the day of their mother's funeral, 8-year-old Benavidez was unsure of how he and his brother would be cared for. His stepdad's family agreed to take his newly born sister, but not the two boys. After his mother's funeral, a man he had only seen a few times introduced himself as their Uncle Nicholas. and his wife, Aunt Alexandria. Raul's mother had asked them to take the brother after her death. The uncle took them in and raised them in El Campo, Texas, along with their 8 cousins and a grandfather, all living in the same house. Raul went to school and worked different jobs and fought a lot. He turned most of his earnings over to his uncle to help support the family. During sugar beet harvesting time, the entire family traveled to Colorado to work in the fields. So they were migrant workers during the time. The work in the field caused him to miss 4 months of school a year, and it proved to be a constant struggle to keep up. He was placed in remedial classes, which mostly consisted of Mexican children, and that's prompted some of the white kids to tone him as a dumb Mexican, which he beat him up. By the time he was 10 years old, he would fight anyone who felt disrespected him, and that phrase enraged him so much that he harnessed his strength building the fields to crush the face of those kids in the schoolyard. The principal's office became his second home. At age 15, Benavidez dropped out of school to work full-time, something that later brought him a great deal of shame. Benavidez faced a lot of racism as a Mexican and did a lot of fighting. He met a white man that he learned to respect and receive respect from. First white man he had ever met and didn't have anything to do with it, gave him some respect back. And Art Haddock was the bookkeeper for the Firestone store in El Campo, Texas, that hired him and taught him responsibility and dependability and a lot of scripture and treated him like a man. While working at the tire shop, Benavidez joined the Texas National Guard, where he met one of his heroes. Visiting one day was Audie Murphy, the most decorated man from World War II. Murphy was raised in Texas, grew up in poverty, and was small in stature, just like Benavidez, who at that time was 5 feet 6 inches and 130 pounds. Benavidez felt like the Army was his only way to be fed, housed, and trained in several trades. So in 1954, he joined the Army. Even though he wanted to go airborne, he did not get it, nor did he get credit for his National Guard time. He would have to go back through basic training again, just like a brand new recruit. During the basic, the drill sergeants gave him a hard time with his name Raul, so he changed it to Roy. After basic, Roy was sent to Fort Carson, Colorado, for advanced infantry training, but nothing was ever brought up about airborne training, which is why he wanted to get in the Army. After a brief leave, he received orders for Korea. He had his first boat ride on the SS Mitchell and was seasick and homesick for 28 days at sea, and that's the USS Mitchell. He felt he grew up in poverty until he arrived in Korea and saw how the people lived and experienced cold like he had never experienced before. Roy did a 16 cold month tour of Korea. And he also, excuse me there, he also was able to find himself in trouble with the brass on several occasions. He had a knack for that, and you can see the poverty there. Returning from Korea, he was sent to Fort Chaffee, Arkansas, to await further orders. After only a weekend there, he received orders, and he got in trouble that weekend, by the way, too. He received orders for Germany and a 5-day leave. Now, he just came back from Korea, and instead of giving him a 30-day leave, they gave him a 5-day leave and after serving and sent him to Germany. After he served in a 16th-month tour in Germany, he returned stateside and married Lala Coy. Lala Coy was a young lady that he started writing to when he was sent to Korea. He came back in a brief time, and they got married. They were assigned to Fort Gordon, Georgia, where he had the job of driving the generals around. One day he was assigned to drive General Westmoreland, and Roy told Westmoreland how much he wanted to be airborne. 2 months later, and 4 years in the military, Roy received orders to report to Fort Bragg, North Carolina for airborne training. After completion of airborne training, he was sent from school to school for further training for 2 years. In October of 1965, Roy received orders for Vietnam, but before shipping out to Vietnam, he was assigned to Vietnamese language schools and general religion and cultural courses, trying to teach him how to deal with the Vietnamese. Getting to Vietnam, he was assigned as an advisor to a Vietnamese infantry unit. As an advisor, he often dressed like the soldiers he was with. Roy felt that he was advising a group of farmers in uniforms fighting another group of farmers in a different uniform. He believed that plan was more political than the military. On what was to be his last patrol out of Tam Key, he was walking point, and he remembers nothing whatsoever. This is what Roy was told later, because he didn't know anything about it. A squad of Marines, this is the way he was dressed, by the way. That's not Roy, but that's the way he was dressed. A squad of Marines found a body near Jungle Trail. The body was dressed in black pajamas and wearing the Ho Chi Minh tire sandals with a communist AK-47 laying near the body. He looked very much a dead man. The body looked like a dead Viet Cong that had stepped on a landmine. Assuming the body, as was often the case, booby-trapped, so they carefully rolled the body over so they could search the body. In searching the body, they found a set of dog tags sewn into the lapel. Benavidez, Sergeant, RP. The Marine Corpsman found a very weak pulse and had the man evacuated. All Roy knows is this story. They believe he stepped on a landmine, and the explosion sent large chunks of the mine flying, and some of it hit him in the butt region, twisting his spine. In other words, instead of coming out into small pieces of shrapnel, it was, when it blew up, it just it was large chunks. But hit him in the butt, twisting his spine like a corkscrew, shattering bone and cartilage, but left his spinal cord intact. After a while, he started to remember at least who he was. When he came to, he didn't know who he was or where he was. But why he was dressed in the VC black pajamas, where he was going, and the mission he was on, he has no idea. Has no idea why he was dressed there and how he got there. The doctors at Brooks Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas, gave the diagnosis that he had brain damage and would never walk again. The therapy the hospital was giving him was how to adapt to life in a wheelchair. And that was not what he wanted. He was very upset about it. He wanted to continue being in the military. He knew that they'd discharge him, that it was over. The word came down that Roy was going to be medically discharged from service. This is not what he wanted. Roy was determined to return to full active duty. So at nights when the ward was quiet, he would roll out of the bed and hit the floor. And then he would crawl to the wall. After several trips at this, he got so he could pull himself up to standing against the wall. And after a while, he then would fight through the pain and lift himself up to his toes. And in fighting through the pain continuously, he was later able to take a small step as long as he was close to the wall. After being at the hospital for 5 months, he was finally given the therapy to walk again. What he'd been demanding all along. Instead of giving him experiences in the wheelchair, they started giving him training and therapy for walking. After a couple of months, he was declared fit for light duty, even though he was still in excruciating pain, which he never mentioned. Roy was made active and was signed to duty at Fort Bragg as an administrative assistant to the personnel officer of an airborne unit. Living off pain medication and alcohol, he did a job that he did not like doing because he felt he was a warrior. Spent a lot of time at the enlisted man's club. Finally realized that he could not continue that way. He began to go into a gym. The exercise did wonders for him, enough for him to requalify with his jump status. He kept working on the gym by himself until he finally built it back up that he could go to jump. Well, he really wasn't qualified for jump status. It just one of his neighbors happened to be going out for their qualifying jump, and he went with them. So he made his first jump without anybody even knowing it. And even though he hit the ground, was in great deal of pain, he went on and did several more jumps that day. So he requalified for that extra money. Then he decided to go after another dream of his, special forces. Even though 7% of healthy men flunked out of training, was some creative paperwork. His paperwork he put in some time ago was kind of lost in the shuffle. So Roy talked with one of the other airborne guys there that he knew, and they did some finagling of paperwork, and he was assigned to special forces training. And remember, he still has a hard time walking. He's still taking Darvon and so forth, or whatever medicine was. Being a school dropout and the pressure to learn the mental part, as well as struggling with his pain from his previous injuries, were rough. On top of that, he was also the ranking enlisted man, so they put him in charge until another man came in, and that gave him some more time to study. But he never refused to give up. He kept fighting. He graduated and is expected to receive orders for Vietnam, flying to Cam Bay mid-January of 1968. Shortly after getting into country, he realized this was a different war than he experienced in his first tour. Now, instead of being just an advisor, the special forces were being used in more combat roles. Special forces and regular line units had built up some animosity towards each other, causing valuable information to not get to where it needed to get sometimes. Everybody that wasn't special forces and airborne were known as legs. And so the special forces were the elite of the group. Roy began his second tour at the B-56 camp in Two Corps area near the village of Ho Ning Tao. Okay, he was part of the 5th Special Forces Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observation Group that was known as MACB-SOG. SOG personnel consisted of Army Special Forces, Marine Force Recon, Navy SEALs and Air Force air commanders and the air crews, CIA, United States Information Agency, and along with some civilian groups. Most of what they did is still classified as top secret even today. As soon as he arrived at the camp, he started a new phase of training. This is where Roy picked up his nickname and call sign. They called him Tango Mike Mike, well, that mean Mexican, because he still liked to fight. Special Forces Operation Detachment B-56 Project Sigma was formed in August of 1966 and created for the purpose of providing reconnaissance in an area controlled by the VC. And there's their patch. As with Special Forces OD B-50 Omega, Sigma was supposed to have an Armored Ranger Battalion attached to it, but this idea was vetoed by Special Forces, and they supplied their own forces. They were located at Camp Ho Nok Tao near Tu Duc, along Highway 1 between Saigon and Long Binh. Now, some of y'all out there probably can pronounce these much better than I can. I have high-range hearing problems. That's the reason I'm supposed to be wearing hearing aids, and so some of these I can't hear some of the infants. I love Vietnamese. It sounds great, except I can't pick up the different signals the way they say it. B-56 Project Sigma had 8 reconnaissance teams, 3 commando reaction companies, and 168-man Nung security company. The personnel for the commando companies and the reconnaissance team were either ethnic Cambodians or Nung mercenaries. In 1968, their heavy training and missions continued in addition to working with the Cambodian mercenaries. What they were doing, they were learning how to rappel out of helicopters and different ways of working with helicopters and so forth. And they were constantly training, even though some of their missions were also the training. The CIDGs, which were members of the Civilian Irregular Group, CIDGs, that was made up of South Vietnamese who volunteered to fight for and defend their villages and country and paid by the Americans. They worked a lot with special forces, and that's some of them there. You can see. Towards the end of April, 3 of Roy's closest friends were assigned a highly secret mission. They were told to be joining 2 South Vietnamese special forces warrant officers and 7 CIDGs to be inserted into Cambodia. The purpose of the mission was a North Vietnamese regular unit was suspected to be moving into South Vietnam from Cambodia. The Special Forces group were to find it and map out the trails the communists were using. And the 12-men team were also tasked to steal a communist truck and drive it back to Special Forces camp. Okay, and then that's a crazy one. American intelligence expected a major Tet offensive, and they wanted information that was being hauled in the trucks and for materials and so forth. The Special Forces team landed without incident and very soon found a well-traveled trail. Leaving one man at the point that they discovered the trail, the rest of the team moved up the trail to check it out. They found a group of communist woodcutters. They were clearing the path for a larger group. The team were able to kill them all, but before one of them died, he was able to fire off a shot alerting anyone in the area. The team pulled back to the original spot where they had found the trail and called command and control, which was flying above them in a helicopter, for immediate extraction. But when command and control called back to the base, they were denied extraction in order to return to the landing zone, which was really surprising because they knew if the team had been discovered that the NVA would be there looking for them at the landing zone. As the team was making their way back to the landing zone, LZ, they stopped and listened. They heard the North Vietnamese. Now, we're not talking about Viet Cong here now. We're talking about the North Vietnamese Army. These are hardcore NVA. These are the men who wore the uniforms and pith helmets, went through basically the same training that our soldiers went through. They heard them talking and hacking their way through the jungle, forest, just looking for them. As the North Vietnamese got closer, the team again requested to be extracted, but was denied and told to continue the mission. They left the landing zone, and after crossing the field, they ran into 12 NVA troops. After a brief firefight, one of the NVAs was able to set off a grenade, which alerted all the others. The team again called in for extraction, and the request this time was granted. The extraction helicopter was shot up coming in, and the pilot crew were all wounded. Rather than crash land and fill up the limited area for the next helicopter to land, the pilot was able to pull up and limp away to Amlock. He knew that if he crash landed there, there was no other place for another helicopter to come in because the landing site was too small. The Special Forces team on the ground was running out of ammo. A chopper flying low kicked out some ammo for them, but the team was unable to get to the ammo, so they were still running low. The team attempted to move to another location to be prepared for another extraction attempt, but were shot up and severely wounded. Meanwhile, back at camp, unaware of his friend's plight, Roy was at a church service being conducted by a chaplain on the hood of a Jeep. They began hearing heavy fighting over the radio and someone calling for help. Roy ran to the flight line and saw the shot up choppers coming in and heard the crews talking about how many communists were on the ground around the team. And every helicopter came in had a different number, and the number always got bigger. One of the door gunners died in his hands, but one of the pilots was going to go back. Roy jumped on the next helicopter and was going back to the extraction point. He had no plan, just a desire to help his friends on the ground. The chopper zigzagged, trying to avoid enemy ground fire. The pilot told Roy it was too hot for him to land, but Roy told him to get as close as he could. With no real plan, Roy rolled out of the chopper with nothing but a medical bag and his K-bar knife. Didn't they tell you early on in life not to take a knife to a gunfight? And a desire to help his buddies. He was only on the ground for a few seconds before he was hit in the leg by a communist bullet. Making his way to the tree line, the first team member he saw was shot in the eye with his eyeball hanging down on his cheek, propped up on his tree, still firing his weapon. Then he saw his other two friends, both were badly wounded. Roy yelled over to them and they were going to get out, that they did not have permission to die yet. Just then, Roy was hit in his thigh. but he managed to throw out a green smoke grenade to show the evacuation choppers where to land. As soon as the chopper landed, everyone who could move got up, got with help of the got to the helicopter with the help of the crew members. Two of the team members were too badly wounded to get there on their own, so Roy fought his way to them. He learned that one of the team members was dead and he had classified documents on him. He didn't want to leave those for the communists to get a hold of. He told the two wounded team members to crawl towards the chopper. He had to go recover the documents that would not fall in the communist hands. Roy did not want to leave his friend's body, so he grabbed the documents and was pulling a friend's body along towards the chopper when he was hit square in the back. He fell forward and blacked out momentarily. Regaining consciousness, he realized he could not continue dragging the body. When he turned to continue to the helicopter, he discovered it had crashed. 5 men had survived the crash and were turning the NVA fire. Roy helped get them out of the helicopter into a group of trees and divided them into two groups, calling for air support. Everything close and available came their way. 2 F-100s came in dropping 2 napalm bombs each, which is pretty hairy in itself, to even be close. The 2 cluster bombs each. Now, the cluster bombs are the big bombs. They have little bombs in them, and those little bombs have like ball bearings in it, and they just go fly everywhere. Between jet attacks, the gunships were coming in and pouring bullets and rockets into the NVA. So we get some pretty good cover now. With all that was going on, one lone slick. Now, the reason I call it slick because it has no guns on it. It can't shoot. All it's going to do is pick up. Came in and touched down about 25 meters from the team's location. Roy and the team knew this was to be the last chance to get away. The team was surrounded by 350 NVA troops. Bullets were coming from so many directions, the team found it impossible to fire back because they had no idea where it was coming from. While giving the team leader his third shot of morphine, Roy was again hit in the leg. The chopper medic ran to help. Roy and the medic carried and drug as many of the wounded to the waiting helicopter they could, but the enemy fire was so intense, a lot of the wounded were wounded again as being loaded into the chopper. The chopper was getting pretty shot up. The pilot and co-pilots were shooting their pistols out the window at the NVA. That has to be close because when they're shooting, you shoot them with a pistol. On a return trip to get more wounded, a NVA smashed his rifle in the back of Roy's head. He was stunned, but not out. But the enemy soldier was stunned also because he thought he would kill the guy when he hit him that hard. Roy turned towards the enemy soldier who bayoneted Roy in the arm before he was able to bury his K-bar into the chest of the NVA. The last bullet that hit Roy opened up a gash wound in his stomach. So he was having to hold his intestines in with his hands. He had great difficulty seeing as his head was heavily bleeding and running into his eyes. As Roy Benavidez assisted the last badly wounded team member while holding his own intestines in with his hand, he blacked out and was himself dragged into the chopper. Somehow the chopper pilot was able to get the chopper into the air with no instructions, no instrument reading, the chopper all shot up and blood everywhere and get back. They found out later the NVA had been waiting for the Special Forces team. There were more than 30 foxholes dug by the NVA and they were manned with crew-served weapons around the landing zone. So somebody talked. This is Roy's words and what happens next and what he remembers. My next semi-conscious memory was that of lying on the ground outside the house. I couldn't move or speak. I was in deep shock, but I knew that the medics were placing me into a body bag. They thought I was dead and couldn't respond. To this day, I can still hear the sound of that snaps being closed on that green bag. My eyes were blinded. My jaws were broken. I had over 37 puncture wounds. My intestines were exposed. Jerry Cunningham recognized my face in the body bag before it was closed. I remember Jerry screaming, "That's Benavidez, get a doctor." When the doctor placed his hand on my chest and felt for a heartbeat, I spat into his face. He quickly reversed his decision from dead to he won't make it, but we'll try. Tough man. Roy was sent to a hospital in Saigon and kept under heavy doses of pain medicine. He faded in and out of conscious while he received numerous surgeries. He was then sent to Japan for more intensive surgery. And from Japan, he was moved to Brooks Army Medical Center at Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, Texas, where he spent almost a year. But he was close to home, so his wife would come visit. Roy had shrapnel in his head, scalp, shoulder, buttocks, feet, and legs. Some they were able to remove and some not. Shrapnel had destroyed his right lung. His jaws were broken where he had been hit in the mouth and back of his head with the butt of a rifle butt. AK-47 bullets had hit him in the back. One bullet exiting below his heart. Another was in his lower back. Both arms had been slashed by the NVA's bayonet. One day while Roy was still convalescing in bed, a second lieutenant came into the ward and was handing out medals, not saying anything at all, just kind of tossing them to the recipients and moving on to the next. When they got to Roy and gave him 2 Purple Hearts and the Distinguished Service Cross and moved on. The Distinguished Service Cross is just behind the Medal of Honor as the second highest medal of the United States rewards. The warden of the DSC has a certain protocol, not just tossed to the recipient. A male nurse on duty took the medal and left. Well, Roy was beginning to wonder if he'd ever see it again. But then General Westmoreland, who was then serving as the Chief of Staff, came and officially awarded the Distinguished Service Cross to Sergeant Roy Benavidez. And they talked about how he had talked with General Westmoreland driving him and how he wanted to become airborne. Rumors started then that Roy was nominated for the Medal of Honor. Just rumors. If you know anything about the military, it lives on rumors. As he and his fellow soldiers were convalescing, they watched TV and the news about what was happening in Vietnam. Mostly they saw the changes in the American public towards the war in Vietnam. The 1968 Tet Offensive led to the changing opinion of the American people, especially some in powerful positions. After Walter Cronkite did a 360 degrees and said the best the United States could hope for was a stalemate, opposition grew substantially. Famous and popular reporter Walter Cronkite speaks out against the war. I know that when they were first ever talking about the Tet Offensive, they were talking about how the Viet Cong got in and took over the American embassy, which was really upsetting the American people. But the Viet Cong only got into the courtyard. They never got into buildings. They blew a hole in the wall and got in, and all of them but 2 were killed getting in, and they were captured and taken out. In May of 1969, Roy was discharged from the hospital and assigned temporary duty at Fort Devens, Massachusetts. He also made his last and very painful jump while there. I can't imagine. For someone who grew up in South Texas, he found Massachusetts a little too cold for him and his family. And calling on an old friend, he was assigned to Fort Riley, Kansas, where he stayed for 3 years before being assigned to Fort Sam Houston, Texas. He served for a couple of years as a driver for a general. When the general retired, he gave Roy the opportunity to pick his own next assignment. Roy became an advisor with the Special Forces Reserves and was working there when the last soldier left Vietnam in 1973. That was an American soldier, by the way. In 1975, when Vietnam fell to the communists. There were more Medal of Honor rumors. Roy Benavidez retired on full disability in 1976 and moved back to El Campo, Texas. There was a lot of work being done to get Roy awarded the Medal of Honor, but there were several problems. First, it was a super secret mission that took place in a country that our government denied we were ever there. Most of the people who witnessed the events were dead, which is a requirement of the Medal of Honor to have live people to talk about it. But his friends persevered and found people to write statements as to Roy's above and beyond feats, and it was official. Sergeant Roy Benavidez was to be awarded the nation's highest award, the Medal of Honor. February 1981. Now, it was supposed to have been originally, it was supposed to have been given, the Medal of Honor was supposed to have been presented to him by Jimmy Carter. Everybody remembers the hostage crisis. For some reason, it got put back until Reagan came in. He took 43 of his family members to the White House for the ceremony to receive the Medal of Honor. And he stepped on the president's toes a couple of times, literally. President Reagan told the audience of what happened on the 2nd of May, 1968, and read the citation to everyone present. Roy was later to say that was the proudest day of his life. And so that's him and Reagan. You would think now all he had to do was relax and enjoy his family and give a few speeches every now and then, but not Roy. On 22 February 1983, Roy received a letter from the Social Security Administration saying they wanted him to be retested by one of their doctors and a psychiatrist regarding his war wounds in order to see if he was faking the extent of his wounds. The letter also stated if it was determined that he had falsified his records, he would be liable to reimbursement the government for the funds he received over the last 7 years. Roy met with the prescribed doctors of the Social Security, and they verified he was completely 100% disabled. But 2 weeks later, he received another letter ordering him to appear before another psychiatrist and an administrative judge. For nearly 3 hours, he answered their questions about the events in Cambodia. They had him stripped down so they could examine his wounds. They were skeptical still of his disabilities and kept asking him about the other men involved. They were trying to prove him crazy. That administrative judge ordered him to again meet and that another psychiatrist would decide his status. But before he attended this next meeting, Roy was contacted by a reporter with the Dallas Morning News, asking him about the cutting off of the Social Security benefits of several 100,000 veterans, widows, and children of the veterans. This was the first he knew of the situation, and he filled the reporter on his own situation. He just really let the reporter have it. When the story came out, there was a firestorm of reporters, veterans, and their families reaching out to Roy, wanting help from him. Roy was invited to speak before a special hearing on the Select Committee on Aging in the House of Representatives. He gave his story and then answered questions from the congressmen and women. 3 weeks after his testimony at the committee meeting, he received a call from a congressman thanking him for his testimony and that benefits to those receiving them would continue, that any cuts in benefits would be restored. So they believed what he said finally. Sergeant Roy P. Benavidez awarded the Medal of Honor. His comments were, I knew for 4 years, Special Forces via SOG units had done extensive intelligence gathering behind enemy lines. We had discovered that North Vietnamese were working like termites to build underground cities and to stock them with necessities in Laos and Cambodia. The data we compiled was supposed to be going unfiltered to the White House. A great deal of the work that my buddies and I did was lost. Many of them were lost as well. Bearing that knowledge had been difficult enough, and the questioning of my eligibility for Social Security benefits added to my other concerns nearly brought me to my knees. Roy traveled all over the country as a Medal of Honor recipient. He was spoke at various groups, and this is some of the things he had to say. Freedom has its price. That price is often human flesh and blood. He would tell them, when a free nation, such as the United States of America, commits its military to war on foreign soil, the objective of that war must be clearly defined, and the majority of the host nation must be committed to the doctrine of individual and national freedom. The Vietnam War was a tragedy that should not have happened because, in my opinion, the majority of the South Vietnamese did not understand or support individual freedom. They were ill prepared as fighters to wage war, and many, it seemed, hoped only for a benevolent dictator. The rules of engagement with the enemy were wrong. These rules were not military rules, but civilian rules. Well, that's one of the most powerful statements right there that you could ever make. This is some of the comments that was made under his picture. You can see him here. President George Bush says about Roy, Barbara and I think the world of this man. When I see him, I get goose pimples, realizing all the wounds he received while defending his country. Sergeant, I'm so proud and so moved by what you did for our country. Nancy and I are honored to be here with you. President Ronald Reagan. Greater love. Okay, we're going to skip that part. Greater love. The USNS Benavidez is a Bob Hope class roll-on, roll-off vehicle. This is it right there, the Benavidez, cargo ship of the United States Navy. She was built by Northrop Grumman Ship Systems, New Orleans, and delivered to the Navy on 10 September 2003. They assigned her to the United States Department of Defense Military Sealift Command. Benavidez is named for Medal of Honor recipient Master Sergeant Roy P. Benavidez. Now, there have been 2 schools named after him. There has been a lot of streets, statues built all over every place for him. Master Sergeant Roy P. Benavidez passed away 29 November 1998 in South Texas. That's the headstone and so forth there, and the flowers and his Medal of Honor, Master Sergeant, Vietnam Purple Heart, beloved husband, father. This is a citation. It's long, so I may get a little tongue-tied here. Citation, this is a citation he received with the awarding of the Medal of Honor. Master Sergeant, then Staff Sergeant, Roy P. Benavidez, United States Army, who distinguished himself by a series of daring and extremely valorous actions on 2nd of May, 1968, while assigned to Detachment B-56, 5th Special Forces Group Airborne, 1st Special Forces Republic of Vietnam. On the morning of 2nd of May, 1968, a 12-man Special Forces reconnaissance team was inserted by helicopter in a dense jungle area west of Loc Ninh, Vietnam, to gather intelligence information about confirmed large-scale enemy activity. This area was controlled and routinely patrolled by the North Vietnamese Army. After a short period of time on the ground, the team met heavy enemy resistance and requested emergency extraction. 3 helicopters attempted extraction, but were unable to land due to intense enemy small arms fire and anti-aircraft fire. Sergeant Benavidez was at the forward operation base at Loc Ninh monitoring operations by radio when these helicopters returned to offload wounded crew members and to assess aircraft damage. Sergeant Benavidez voluntarily boarded a returning aircraft to assist in another extraction attempt. Realizing that all the team members were either dead or wounded or unable to move to the pickup zone, he directed the aircraft to a nearby clearing where he jumped from the hovering helicopter and ran approximately 75 meters under withering small arms fire to the crippled team. Prior to reaching the team's position, he was wounded in his right leg, face, and head. Despite these painful injuries, he took charge, repositioned the team members and directing their fire to facilitate the landing of an extraction aircraft and the loading of wounded and dead team members. He then threw smoke canisters to direct the aircraft to the team's position. Despite his severe wounds and under intense enemy fire, he carried and dragged half of the wounded team members to the awaiting aircraft. He then provided protection fire by running alongside the aircraft as it moved to pick up the remaining team. As the enemy fire intensified, he hurried to recover the body and classify documents of the dead team leader. When he reached the leader's body, Sergeant Benavidez was severely wounded by a small arms fire in an abdomen and a grenade fragment in his back. At nearly the same moment, the aircraft pilot was mortally wounded and his helicopter crashed, although in extremely critical condition due to his multiple wounds. Sergeant Benavidez secured the classified documents and made his way back to the wreckage, where he aided the wounded out of the overturned aircraft and gathered the stunned survivors into a defensive perimeter. Aircraft under increased enemy automatic weapons and grenade fire, he moved around the perimeter, distributing water ammunition to his weary men, who most of them were wounded, reinstilling them in will to live and fight, facing a buildup of enemy opposition with a beleaguered team. Sergeant Benavidez mustered his strength and calling in tactical airstrikes and directed the fire from supporting gunships to suppress the enemy's fire and so permit another extraction attempt. He was wounded again in his thigh by small arms fire while administering first aid to a wounded team member. Just before another extraction helicopter was able to land, his indomitable spirit kept him going as he began to ferry his comrades to the craft. On his second trip with the wounded, he was clubbed from additional wounds to his, he was clubbed from behind, causing additional wounds to head and arms before killing his adversary. He then continued under devastating fire to carry the wounded to the helicopter. Upon reaching the aircraft, he spotted and killed 2 enemy soldiers who were rushing the craft from an angle that prevented the aircraft door gunner from firing upon them. With little strength remaining, he made one last trip to the perimeter to ensure that all classified material had been collected or destroyed, and to bring in the remaining wounded. Only then, in extreme serious condition from numerous wounds and loss of blood, did he allow himself to be pulled into the extraction. Sergeant Benavidez's gallant choices to join voluntarily his comrades who were in critical states to expose himself constantly to withering enemy fire and his right to be stopped despite numerous severe warnings. I'm having trouble keeping my words together here. Saved the lives of at least 8 men. His fearless personal leadership, tenacious devotion to duty, and extremely valorous action in the face of overwhelming odds were in keeping with the highest tradition of the United States military and reflect utmost credit of him and the United States Army. And again, you have the pictures of Roy there. And okay, we should have, okay. Now, this guy should have, well, I can't understand why they have not made a movie about this man. It just, other than people just couldn't believe it. But I tell you, it is real, man. If you get a chance, go on to YouTube and listen to the speech he made. It is unbelievable. A man was about as patriotic as you could be. I could understand why his letter, receiving the letter from Social Security, after he gave everything and then some for his country. And here they were, when they make a man who's already gone through 3 different meetings, make him strip. I mean, what else can you do to the man? Make him strip down to his underwear so they could see his wounds. You can't fathom it, how they would do that. Now, I had I'm always thinking about what my next show is going to be. Sometimes I have brain freeze and so forth, but our next show will be the 9th of September, 2020. And what I'm going to be looking for, I'm going to need y'all to help, okay? Is there another slide before that, Amnon? Or after that? Must be the one after that. Okay, never mind. What I'm going to ask you to do is, my email is Dixon, D-I-X-O-N, Bill 80 at yahoo.com. And I'm going to ask you to send me something. What I'm talking about was the question I'm going to be asking on the next show. And that is, what, anything, did we learn from the war in Vietnam? Now, if you're not a veteran and you lived at that time or whatever, and you want to give an answer, I need your answer too. I need answers, what you felt we learned if we learn anything, and let's add to it, is it made a difference today? I believe we learned a great deal in Vietnam. Unfortunately, I think our politicians did not learn anything. They get, some of them been there 40, 50 years, but they just didn't seem to learn anything. Rules of engagement was one, but you pick what all the way out there on your own. Now, I'm on several Facebook veterans pages, and I asked that question, and I've got probably close to 200 answers to that question. People's giving their opinions, and I'd like to have yours because I think that's something we all ask all the time. When you go back to what Roy had to say, that maybe we shouldn't have been in Vietnam. I've got a lot of Vietnamese friends who are very thankful that we were there. Some of them fought in the military, continued fighting after Saigon fell. They were very thankful we were there. But I think the average guy out in the boonies, as we call them, all he wanted to do was raise his rice and keep his water buffalo safe. And as Roy says, look for a benevolent dictator. Then to them, freedom was just to be left alone. They didn't care who was in charge. But then you had the other people who really wanted the freedom and so forth, because they knew that the communists would come in and take everything from everybody. And those people had never really known freedom. And for people who've known freedom, benevolent dictator would not have worked. But when he talks about how they had done all this work, going behind the scenes, getting all this information and sending it back, and because of sometimes the little friction between the leg soldiers and the special forces, that sometimes the people who probably needed that information didn't get it there. So send me an email or come on the show next show, which would be September 9th, and tell us and tell me what you think we learned, if we learned anything. Well, maybe you don't think we learned anything. That's okay. That's whatever. It's whatever you think. It's your opinion. The 20th of September, by the way, actually they're celebrating on the 18th, which is a Friday, but the 20th of September is National POW Recognition Day. Keep an eye on the news and so forth. Well, the news is not going to have anything, but your local calendar, see if anybody's doing anything for the National POWMI Recognition Day. If you're anywhere around the Triangle, North Carolina Vietnam Veterans Incorporated will be doing a special ceremony at the Capitol ground at the Vietnam Memorial there at 6 o'clock on the 18th. Now, not at 12 o'clock like most of our ceremonies are. This one will be at 6 o'clock so you can get home and get out of traffic and so forth. So that's where we are right now. I look forward to getting all your answers on to what you think we learned from Vietnam. I had one of the answers I got was how to hold a doobie. I got one answer going how to duck. And then a lot of them think that the way the government handled the war rather than the soldiers handled the war was part of the problem, and lots of different reasons out there. And some says we didn't earn anything. So that's our show tonight. I hope you enjoyed this hero. Like I said, go on to Facebook, YouTube, and look up Roy and listen to that speech that he made. I can't think of the meeting, but it's there. And just listen to it, and you'll probably want to go back and listen to it on a regular basis. Stay safe, wear your mask, wash your hands, stay away from everybody else, and we look forward to seeing you in September. And you can sing Happy Birthday to me at the second show in September. But again, thank you, and good night. Tell all your friends about us. Of course, that you can go back into the website and click on demand and see any of our past shows. Some of the better shows are some of the older shows, but I'm going to say it one more time. Good night, God bless, and we'll see you in September. Thank you.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.